"Don't open that grave," she begged. But the rancher didn't listen. What he uncovered would haunt him forever. Tonight's tale is one of secrets, curses, and the price of curiosity in the Wild West. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share these stories to keep the fire alive. Now let's begin. The wind carried a dry rattle through the prairie grass, the kind of sound that made a man glance over his shoulder even when he was alone. Jacob Rourke, a weathered rancher with dust on his boots and a shovel slung across his saddle, rode slow along the edge of his land. He wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble had a way of finding lonely men out here in the Wild West. As the sun dipped low, bleeding the sky into copper and red, Jacob spotted something strange up by the oak grove. At first he thought it was just a shadow, maybe a fallen branch moving in the breeze. But when his horse snorted uneasily and shifted, Jacob's eyes narrowed. There was someone kneeling in the dirt. A woman. She was clawing at the ground with her bare hands like a desperate animal. Her dress was torn, streaked with dust and blood. Her hair hung wild around her face, and beside her was a mound of earth, freshly dug, not more than a day old. Jacob pulled his horse to a stop, his chest tight. Graves weren't unusual out here. Disease, violence, and the merciless land saw to that. But this one was wrong. Too shallow, too hurried. And the woman, the way she whispered to the dirt, her voice cracking in the evening air, it chilled him more than the rising wind. He called out gently, "Ma'am, you all right?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide and wild. For a moment she looked ready to run, but her knees buckled, and she fell back against the mound. She shook her head violently. Don't come closer. Don't open it." Jacob frowned, his hand resting on the rifle at his saddle, not to threaten her, but because instincts told him this wasn't ordinary. "What's in there?" he asked. She clutched the dirt as though holding it shut. Her voice was a rasp, almost breaking. "You don't understand. If you dig it up, you'll wish you hadn't." The prairie had grown strangely quiet. Even the cicadas seemed to hush. Jacob felt the weight of the moment settle heavy in his chest. He wasn't a man to scare easy, but something about her tone dug into his bones. Still, he couldn't just ride off. "Who are you?" he asked. The woman's lips trembled. "Nobody, just someone who's already lost too much." Jacob dismounted slowly, his boots crunching over dry grass. He studied her. She wasn't old, maybe in her 20s, but her face looked worn, like someone who had been carrying sorrow longer than she'd lived. Her hands were cut and raw from digging. He gestured at the grave. "Who's buried there?" She froze, her eyes darting as if even speaking it would summon something. At last she whispered, "My sister." Jacob's gut twisted. He'd buried kin before. The memory of lowering his father into the earth still haunted him. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. But she shook her head, eyes flashing with sudden fear. "She's not supposed to be there. I begged them not to, but they said it was the only way. They said it was safer." Jacob stepped closer, his shovel heavy in his grip. "Safer? For who?" The woman's hands clutched her dress. "For everyone." Her words hung sharp in the cooling air. Jacob felt a chill creep up his spine. Safer for everyone? What kind of sister did she bury? The woman suddenly lunged forward, crawling to grab his boots. "Please," she begged. "I know what you're thinking, but don't open that grave. Don't even touch it. If you care about your life, about your soul, you'll leave it closed." Jacob looked down at her trembling hands, her eyes wide with terror. She wasn't lying, he could feel it. But the rancher in him, the man who'd lived with harsh truths and the weight of the unknown, couldn't walk away from a mystery like this. His voice came low, steady. "Ma'am, I can't just leave without knowing. If someone's been wronged, I have to set it right." Her tears streaked through the dirt on her face. She shook her head furiously. "You don't understand. Once you see her, You'll never sleep again." Jacob swallowed hard, staring at the mound. The soil was fresh, the shape uneven, as though whatever lay beneath hadn't been placed carefully. His fingers tightened around the shovel handle. The earth seemed to breathe in the silence, daring him to uncover its secret. The woman's voice broke the stillness once more. "Don't do it, please." But Jacob's boot pressed against the dirt, and with a deep breath he drove the shovel into the ground. The sound of metal slicing through soil was louder than thunder in that heavy silence. The woman screamed, and as Jacob lifted the first shovelful of dirt, he felt the ground shift beneath him. Not like loose earth collapsing, but like something below had stirred. His heart slammed in his chest. For the first time in years, Jacob Rourke was afraid. The shovel clanged against the dirt again, and Jacob froze. He swore the ground beneath him shifted, not from his weight, but from something below pushing back. The woman shrieked and scrambled backward on her hands, eyes wide with panic. "You fool, stop. You don't know what you're waking up." Jacob's pulse thundered in his ears, but he forced himself to steady his breath. He wasn't about to be spooked by wild tales. He'd seen coyotes dig up graves before. He'd seen bandits use shallow mounds to hide their loot. Logic told him there had to be an explanation, and yet, when he glanced at the mound, he could swear the earth rose, just barely, as though something below had shifted. "Ma'am," Jacob said, his voice gravelly but firm, "if someone's in here, alive or dead, I need to know. I can't walk away from it." The woman pressed her hands over her face and sobbed. "You'll regret this. I begged them to burn her, but they wouldn't listen. They said burying her was enough. But it isn't." Jacob's grip tightened on the shovel. Burn her? Who was they? He dug faster, tossing clumps of dirt aside as the air thickened with the smell of damp earth. Each scrape of the blade felt like it echoed for miles. The woman rocked back and forth, whispering prayers under her breath. Jacob ignored her, focused on the hole growing wider. The soil was loose, too loose, as though whoever buried the body had been in a hurry. Then the shovel struck something solid. Wood. Jacob's chest tightened. A coffin, crude and hastily nailed together. He knelt, brushing away the last layer of dirt with his calloused hands until the lid was clear. The woman crawled forward suddenly and grabbed his arm. "Don't open it. Please listen to me, don't." Jacob pulled free, jaw clenched. His whole life he'd lived by one rule. The truth might hurt, but it was better than a lie. He couldn't let fear stop him now. He wedged the shovel's edge under the lid and pried. The wood creaked. The air grew colder. Jacob's breath fogged in the fading light. He blinked, confused. The night air wasn't nearly cold enough for that. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice breaking. "She's not gone, not really. She's waiting." The lid gave way with a sharp crack. Jacob lifted it and nearly dropped the shovel. Inside wasn't what he expected. It wasn't the still face of a woman lying in peace. It wasn't even decay. What Jacob saw made his blood run cold. The body inside was curled unnaturally, like it had been fighting to escape. Her fingernails were bloody stubs, clawed raw against the wood. Her eyes, wide open, stared straight up, frozen in a look of terror. But that wasn't what made Jacob stumble back, his breath catching. It was the faintest sound, slipping out from between her parted lips. A whisper. The corpse exhaled. Jacob staggered, nearly dropping to his knees. The woman screamed, clutching her head. "I told you! She's not dead. She'll never die." The whisper grew louder, more deliberate, though the lips barely moved. Jacob leaned forward, unable to help himself. The sound was unmistakable. It was a word. His name. Jacob. The rancher's heart hammered. He hadn't told her his name, not once. He stumbled back, the shovel clattering from his hands. "What in God's name?" The woman's eyes streamed with tears as she pointed at the coffin. "Now you've done it. She knows you. and she won't let you go." The wind roared suddenly through the grove, whipping the branches overhead. The coffin shuddered, the body twitching unnaturally inside. Jacob felt his stomach churn. This wasn't death. This wasn't life. It was something else. Something caught between. The woman collapsed at his feet, clutching his boots. "You can't leave me now," she sobbed. "She'll come for both of us. We have to finish what they started before it's too late." Jacob stared down into the grave, his body trembling. The whisper came again, stronger this time, dragging across his ears like broken glass. "Jacob." And with a slow, impossible movement, the corpse's hand twitched against the wood. Jacob's throat felt dry as desert sand. He couldn't tear his eyes from that coffin. The corpse's hand twitched again, slow but deliberate, and the sound of his name, drawn out like a snake's hiss, slid into his ears. The woman clung to his boots, sobbing. "Do you see now? Do you believe me?" Jacob's mind whirled. He wanted to deny it, to call it a trick of the wind or his own tired senses, but there was no mistaking it. The lips had moved, the hand had jerked, and the voice, that voice was real. His instincts screamed at him to climb back on his horse and ride until the prairie ended. But his boots stayed rooted to the ground. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the part of him that had always believed no mystery should stay buried. Jacob forced his voice steady. What is she?" The woman lifted her tear-streaked face, her hair whipping in the wind. "My sister," she whispered. "She wasn't always like this. She was beautiful once, kind, but the sickness took her. Only it wasn't a sickness men understand. It was something else." Jacob frowned, his hand tightening on the shovel he'd picked back up. "What do you mean, something else?" The woman's lips trembled. "A curse. That's what the old women called it. She fell ill, then started changing. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating. Her eyes stayed open at night, watching me. And then she shook violently. And then she started whispering to me in my dreams. Words that weren't hers." Jacob swallowed hard, his gaze locked on the body. The whisper came again, dragging his name out like a threat. He asked low, "Who buried her?" The woman looked away, shame in her eyes. "The town. They said it was safer, but they were too afraid to finish the job the way they should have. Fire. That's the only way. But they wouldn't touch her body. They made me dig and cover her. Said if I loved her, it had to be me." Jacob's jaw clenched. He'd heard stories around campfires, whispers of spirits that clung to flesh, half living, half dead. Stories meant to scare men on long nights. But he'd never thought he'd see something like this. The corpse twitched again, harder this time, the coffin creaking under the strain. Jacob's gut twisted. The woman shrieked and pulled at his coat. "It's starting. Once she wakes fully, there's no stopping her. We have to burn her, now." Jacob looked at the grave, then at the woman. He didn't know whether to believe her or call her mad. But the sound of his name again, Jacob, shook him to his core. He whispered, "If I burn her, what happens to you?" The woman's eyes went wide. "To me?" "Yes," Jacob said firmly. "You say she's your sister. If she's cursed, won't it fall on you too?" The woman hesitated. Just a heartbeat, but long enough for Jacob to notice. Her hands slipped from his coat. Her eyes darted to the coffin. "She wants you now," she said softly, almost too softly. "Not me. You opened it. You heard her voice, that means she's yours." Jacob's stomach dropped. He staggered back a step. "What are you saying?" The woman's lips curled into a bitter, broken smile. "I begged you not to. Now she won't let you go. You're marked, just like I was." The whisper came again, louder now. Not just his name this time, more words, slurred but unmistakable. "Jacob, come, closer. The body's hands scraped against the coffin lid, nails screeching like knives on wood. Jacob's blood ran cold. The woman suddenly shoved him toward the grave. He stumbled, nearly falling in. She screamed, her voice a mix of rage and despair. "Take him, sister. Take him instead of me." Jacob spun, rage flashing in his eyes. He shoved her back, but the damage was done. The coffin rocked violently, and the sound of cracking wood split the night. Something inside was rising. Jacob grabbed the shovel with both hands, his knuckles white. The woman scrambled away, laughing and crying all at once. "It's too late. You can't stop her now. She's awake." The coffin lid split. A pale hand shot through, grasping the air, and then, with a strength no dead thing should have, the corpse began to climb out. The wood splintered in a shower of jagged shards, and Jacob's breath caught as the coffin burst open. The figure inside was no longer still. It jerked upright with a sickening stiffness, her hair hanging in clotted strands, her lips moving as that awful whisper poured out again. "Jacob." Her skin was pale as candle wax, stretched tight over sharp bones. Her eyes, still open wide, glowed faintly in the dark, as if fire burned somewhere deep inside them. She dragged herself free of the coffin, nails scraping the dirt, leaving grooves as she crawled toward him. Jacob's instincts screamed to run. Every fiber of his body wanted to bolt for the horse and leave this cursed grove behind. But his boots stayed rooted. If he turned his back now, he knew in his gut she'd be on him before he made it 10 steps. The woman who had begged him earlier crouched behind a tree, sobbing and laughing all at once, her voice jagged with madness. "She's yours now, rancher. You opened her grave. She belongs to you." Jacob raised the shovel like a weapon, the handle trembling in his calloused hands. "Stay back!" he barked. The figure froze mid-crawl, her head snapping up unnaturally fast. Her mouth opened wider, the whisper stretching into a hiss. Her voice was layered, part hers, part something older, darker. "Burn me." Jacob blinked, sweat stinging his eyes. Burn me? That was what the woman had said earlier, that fire was the only way. But was this some trick? A trap? The pale figure twitched, then lunged. Jacob swung hard. The shovel cracked against her shoulder with a dull thud. But she barely flinched. She grabbed the blade with both hands, her flesh tearing against the sharp metal, but she didn't seem to feel pain. Her grip was iron. She yanked the shovel away like it was a twig. Jacob stumbled back, heart pounding. The woman by the tree screamed, "She's stronger now. Every second she's out, she grows stronger." Jacob's eyes darted around desperately. He spotted the lantern hanging from his saddle a few paces away, the only source of flame he had. But the pale figure was between him and the horse, her body jerking closer with every twitching step. The whisper grew louder, almost deafening now, filling the grove. "Jacob. With me." Jacob clenched his fists. He'd faced wolves, bandits, and the raw cruelty of the frontier, but nothing had ever rattled him like this. Still, he wasn't a man to roll over and die. He darted sideways, sprinting through the grass. The pale figure lurched after him with inhuman speed, her joints snapping with every step. Jacob dove for the saddle, yanking the lantern free just as she closed the distance. He swung the lantern hard, shattering the glass against the ground. Flames burst to life, licking up the dry grass. The figure stopped short, hissing, her glowing eyes narrowing at the fire. Jacob held a burning shard of wood in his hand, the heat biting his skin. His chest heaved as he raised it high. "You wanted fire?" he growled. "Then take it." The pale woman let out a scream that wasn't human. Shrill, piercing, a sound that made the trees themselves seem to shiver. Jacob thrust the flame forward. The figure recoiled, shrieking as the firelight touched her skin. For a moment, Jacob thought it might end here, that fire really was the answer. But then the woman behind the tree cried out, "No, it won't work unless you burn the heart." Jacob's stomach dropped. The heart? How in God's name was he supposed to get close enough for that? The pale figure's body writhed, smoke rising from where the fire touched. But she didn't fall. Instead, she staggered sideways, shielding her chest with her clawed hands. Jacob tightened his grip on the burning wood. His mind raced. He'd have one chance, just one, to end this. The pale figure hissed, crouching low, ready to spring. The flames flickered between them, casting her in a hellish glow. And as she lunged, Jacob roared and drove the fire straight toward her chest. Jacob's roar split the night as he drove the burning wood forward. The pale figure shrieked, her body convulsing as the flames licked across her chest. The smell of scorched flesh filled the air, sharp and sickening. For a heartbeat, Jacob thought he had won. That fire would finish what the grave couldn't. But then her clawed hand clamped down on his wrist, stronger than any iron shackle. Her lips moved inches from his face. The whisper slid straight into his ears, cold as a grave. "You can't kill me." Jacob gritted his teeth, forcing the burning shard closer. Her skin blistered and split, but she kept fighting, her strength unholy. His arm trembled. He could feel his muscles giving out. Then, suddenly, she faltered. Her head snapped back, mouth wide, and a scream tore from her throat. Jacob saw why. The fire had reached her heart. Through the torn flesh of her chest, something glowed. A faint, pulsing light, beating like a heart of embers. The woman who had been hiding behind the tree ran forward, her voice shrill. "Push it in! Don't stop now!" Jacob shoved with everything left in him. The flame pierced that glowing heart. For an instant, the pale figure froze, her eyes wide, the whisper dying on her lips. Then, the ground shook. A wave of heat exploded outward, knocking Jacob to his knees. The pale figure erupted into fire, not the flicker of a lantern, but a raging, unnatural blaze. She screamed, her voice twisting into something monstrous. The flames devoured her body, turning her into a writhing torch. Jacob shielded his face, teeth gritted as the fire roared higher. When it finally died down, nothing remained but ash, scattered on the night wind. Silence fell. Jacob stayed kneeling, his chest heaving. His hands shook as he dropped the blackened shard of wood. He stared at the ashes, waiting for them to move, to rise, to whisper again. But they didn't. The woman stepped closer, her face streaked with sweat and tears. She knelt beside the ashes, trembling. "It's over," she whispered. "It has to be." Jacob looked at her sharply. "Has to be?" She froze, her lips tightening. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Jacob's gut twisted. He grabbed her wrist, his voice hard. "What aren't you telling me?" She tried to pull away, but he held fast. Finally, her voice cracked. She wasn't the only one. Jacob's blood ran cold. The woman sank to the ground, sobbing. "There were 3 of us. 3 sisters. I thought burying her alone would be enough, but now..." She looked at him with hollow eyes. "Now they'll come for me. And for you." Jacob stared at her, his mind spinning. 3 sisters. That meant the nightmare wasn't over. It had just begun. Before he could speak, a sound drifted through the night air. A whisper, not from the ashes, not from the grave, from the trees. Jacob froze, his skin crawling as the voice slithered across the grove. A different voice this time, higher, softer, but no less chilling. "Jacob," the woman screamed, covering her ears. "They're here," she cried. "The others, they've woken." Jacob spun toward the darkness, shovel in hand, his body trembling. The prairie wind howled through the trees, and the shadows seemed to move. From the gloom, 2 faint shapes emerged, thin, stumbling figures with eyes glowing faintly like dying coals. Jacob's heart slammed against his ribs. One cursed sister had been enough to nearly end him. Now there were more. The grove turned deathly still, broken only by the crunch of feet dragging across dry earth. 2 more figures staggered from the tree line, their bodies bent, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Jacob tightened his grip on the shovel, though his arms felt like lead. He was exhausted, drenched in sweat, lungs raw from smoke. Fighting one had nearly killed him. 2 more? He wasn't sure he'd live to see dawn. The woman fell to her knees beside him, shaking her head violently. "They followed me," she wept. "I thought burying one would hold them, but they're bound together. If one wakes, the others will too." Jacob's eyes stayed locked on the sisters. They moved slowly, deliberately, their heads twitching like broken dolls. He knew fear wanted him to run, but running would only buy him a few more breaths. He whispered to the woman, "How do we stop them?" She clutched her chest, her nails digging into her skin. "The same way you stopped her. Fire to the heart. But..." She choked on her words. "They'll never let you get close, not unless..." "Unless what?" Jacob snapped. Her voice dropped to a tremor. "Unless you use me." Jacob's head whipped toward her. "What in God's name are you saying?" Tears streaked her dirt-stained face. "They want me. I'm their blood. If I give myself to them, you'll have your chance. Burn them while they take me." Jacob stared at her, the weight of her words hitting him like a hammer. Sacrifice herself? He didn't even know her name, and yet, maybe she was right. Maybe it was the only way. The sisters crept closer, their whispers overlapping now, his name over and over like a hymn of damnation. "Jacob, Jacob." Jacob's hand trembled on the shovel. He thought of his land, his cattle, the peace he'd worked so hard for. He thought of all the lonely nights by the fire, when the silence had been heavier than a gun at his side. And he thought of the way this woman had begged him not to open the grave, yet stayed here anyway, fighting alongside him in her own broken way. "No," he said firmly, "you're not dying tonight." Her eyes widened. "You don't understand. You can't fight them both." But Jacob was already moving. He ripped the burning lantern from the ground, sparks spilling as he swung it wide. The flames flared, pushing the sisters back a step. "Stay behind me," Jacob growled. The sisters hissed, circling like wolves. Their voices filled the air, cold and suffocating. The woman sobbed, clutching her arms, torn between running and standing her ground. Jacob steadied himself, lowering the flame to the dry grass. Fire licked outward, circling them in a ring of light. The sisters shrieked, their voices twisting into rage. "You see that?" Jacob spat, his voice raw. "You're not the only ones who know how to whisper." With a roar, he charged. The first sister lunged, but Jacob drove the burning lantern straight into her chest. Flames engulfed her, her scream shaking the trees as she collapsed into ash. The second came from the side, clawing at him with inhuman speed. Jacob swung the shovel, the steel edge cracking her skull with a sickening thud. She staggered, and Jacob shoved the flame into her chest. She convulsed, shrieked, and exploded into fire, falling in a heap of smoldering bone. Silence. Only the crackle of fire in the grass remained. Jacob stood trembling, every muscle burning, his lungs heaving. He looked at the woman. She was on her knees, staring at the ashes, her face lit by the flames. "It's over," Jacob rasped. "They're gone." The woman's lips trembled. She slowly shook her head. "You don't understand. There was never 3. Jacob froze. "What do you mean?" Her eyes lifted to his, hollow and broken. "There were 4. Before Jacob could move, her body jerked violently. She screamed, clutching her chest, as a faint glow began to pulse beneath her skin, right where her heart beat. Jacob staggered back, horror flooding him. The whispers rose again, louder than ever, pouring not from the trees or the ashes, but from inside her. The woman's eyes glowed. She smiled faintly, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I told you. You should never have opened the grave." The wind howled, the fire roared higher, and Jacob's shout was swallowed by the night. Some say the rancher's screams still echo across the prairie on cold nights. Others whisper the grave was never truly closed. What do you believe? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this tale, hit that like button and subscribe for more Wild West stories that will keep you up at night.